being live streamed. Wonderful. That's what I wanted to hear. It's what I want to see. Setting up, redirecting. Tech stuff is so fun. And I think we are ready to roll. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like we should have some sort of dramatic NFL films music to this, or ESPN college football music to this. College football season is here, everyone. We made it, and no, last week's game between Nebraska and Illinois does not count. This is a full-scale, grandiose opening to the college football season. Number of Big Ten games on the schedule, a number of top 25 matchups, starting as soon as tonight. As far as the Big Ten games, I know I saw Ohio State and Minnesota. We're going to kick off in just a couple hours over on Fox. The one matchup we all care about is number 17 Indiana going to Iowa City, going to Penick Stadium to take on number 18 Iowa. And we've got the full breakdown of that game coming up and the key matchups to watch and our predictions and so much more here on episode 215 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Joining me today, almost tonight, this still counts as today if you ask me, is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, how fired up are you for this week one matchup? Indiana against Iowa, Tom Allen and Kirk Ferentz, let's go.
I mean, I'm super excited, obviously. I mean, when's the last time Indiana had a ranked matchup, like ranked versus ranked matchup to start the season? I'll be waiting for that answer because that's something for our statistics department to get on. But again, like the biggest game of the season, start the season, like it's the most impactful. I mean, the best game of the season, some people could argue is at home against Cincinnati, top 10 opponent coming home, or you could argue it's Ohio State at home. But the most important by far right now is game one. You got to win this game, and we're starting out strong. And there's a lot of parallels between this Iowa team and this Indiana team. I mean, when you look at the teams, they both finished last year 6-2. Iowa didn't play in a bowl game. We did. I wish we didn't play in that bowl game. It's fine. They both have our star junior quarterbacks returning, where we have Penix returning. Iowa has Spencer Petrus returning. I think Penix is much better than Petrus, but I don't know if that's neither here nor there. They're both have been hyped up this year. Then we have our star positional players returning as well. When you look at for running back for Iowa, you have Tyler Goodson returning, and of course you have Fryfogle returning for Indiana. Both teams lost a bit on the offensive line from last year. Notably, Iowa lost Quay Cronk. That name might sound familiar because he's a former Indiana guy. There's just a lot of parallels on these teams. A lot of some new faces in important positions, a lot of really old faces, and people have been there for a while on both teams. And of course, the head coaching matchup where you have what basically Tom Allen has been trying to turn Indiana into what Iowa has been, and Kirk Ferentz has turned Iowa into during his tenure there, going up against each other. And Ferentz is much older now and getting on, and people are starting to talk about when is his time to move away from Iowa. And here's Tom Allen coming in, new guy, third season, for first big game to start the season in his tenure. So there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn between both programs.
Yeah, it should be a really fun matchup. Indiana is a 4-point underdog right now, depending on where you look. The over-under for the matchup is 46. So if you do the math there, Vegas is predicting a 25-21 Iowa victory. Fun fact, Iowa has the longest active streak in the nation as far as a team that has not allowed over 24 points in a game. So Indiana, you got to think if they can break at least that mark, that's a good sign. Things are going well for the Hoosiers. I'm fired up that it's just a big time heavyweight matchup in week 1. It's normal for Indiana, normal for a lot of teams around the country to schedule lightly in that first game. There's no preseason in college football. So to get your feet wet and to figure out some things on the depth chart, you might schedule a little lighter. Indiana in the past has scheduled teams like Towson and Florida International in order to get some comfortability before the big time games start, but the Hoosiers are diving right into it with this top 20 matchup against Iowa. And like I said before, a number of other big time Big Ten matchups to start the year: Ohio State, Minnesota, Michigan State, Northwestern, Penn State, Wisconsin. Big Ten teams are not taking it easy to get things going. You might argue that it's good for Indiana to front load a lot of their tough games. The biggest question surrounding this team is the health of Penix Jr. And well, if you can get him, if you can ensure that he's on the field for these big time matches against Iowa and Cincinnati and Penn State and Western Kentucky on the road, then you might feel a little bit better about your chances. Matt, you talked about Kirk Ferentz. He's leading the Hawkeyes. Iowa last year finished 6-2, and so it's the same record as the Hoosiers. But right now, Indiana's a team that's returning a lot of their players from that 6-2 season. Iowa lost a lot of guys. Let's take a look at some of the players that Iowa lost since last season before diving into who they still have. It's still a really good team, but when I was doing some research going into this matchup, I was surprised to hear a lot of the firepower that the Hawkeyes lost, starting with defensive tackle Davion Nixon, who was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. How about offensive skill players Mekhi Sargent, the running back, Amir Smith-Marset, and Brandon Smith at wide receiver? You talked about the offensive line departure in Coy Cronk. They also lost their left tackle Alaric Jackson to the Rams and Cole Banwert to the Titans. In the NFL, other key defensive players they lost were leading tackler Nick Neiman. All in all, they also lost Chauncey Golston, who led their team in sacks last year, along with Davion Nixon. They also lost linebacker Barrington Wade. So this is an Iowa team that I look at and I say, okay, you know what? Getting them week 1 where they're trying to figure some things out, not the worst situation for Indiana to go in and sneak out with a road victory. Matt, we know Iowa's defense is really good, and they're always going to be tough in the trenches, and they return a lot of key players in their secondary, guys like corner Riley Moss, guys like corner Matt Hankins, as well as safety Jack Kerner. How do you think Indiana should attack Iowa's defense to get to that 24-point mark we were talking earlier?
Yeah, the way to attack them is, when you listed off all the names that departed, it was defensive line, linebackers, right? They lost a lot of people in the middle. So attack the middle of the field, run the ball. I think we're going to see a lot of Stephen Carr this game. Again, a lot of new guys there. And we have a new offensive line. So again, this could be all null and void if the offensive line isn't up to snub. But there is there's a blueprint there to where you can attack the newbies on Iowa's defense, and you can take some of the pressure off of Michael Penix in this game if you can run the ball. Again, there's a lot of people coming in, a lot of people assuming new roles, first game back, and you have a new running back and hopefully a new scheme of offense that IU is going to be running. There's not going to be a lot of game tape for this, of how they're going to use Stephen Carr. So I really like the idea of getting the ground game going. So if you can do that, then again, it's simple. Every football fan knows this. If you open up if you can run the ball, you can throw the ball as well.
And it also avoids pressure at the doorstep of Michael Penix Jr. It exposes him to much less contact. One thing I noticed a lot in Iowa's games from last year is that they are not afraid to throw the blitz at the opposing quarterback. It's not like they're a team that has a lot of stubbornness in their front four and they say we're going to rush 4 and drop 7. No. They're more than willing to bring interesting coverages, interesting blitzes. I thought it was I thought it was cool that, and almost strange nowadays, that Iowa has the same offensive coordinator and the same defensive coordinator for at least the last 5 years. So they've got a lot of continuity in that coaching staff, and you're seeing it translate into results on the football field. Iowa is, according to the ESPN S&P Plus ratings, the 16th ranked team in the country with the 56th rated offense in the FBS, but the first ranked defense. So the advanced stats, even after the departures from last year, really like Iowa's defense better than any other defense in college football. Indiana is a 28th ranked S&P Plus rating in that rating system. 33rd on offense, 32nd on defense, so a little bit more balanced out. The media projected Iowa to finish second in the Big Ten West behind Wisconsin. Out of 34 votes, Iowa got 5 first-place votes. The other 29 went to the Badgers. Indiana was projected to finish third in the Big Ten East, for what it's worth, behind Ohio State and Penn State. To talk about some of Iowa's star players on the current roster, the 2021 roster, it starts with Tyler Linderbaum. He's a first-team All-American at center. He and that running back, Tyler Goodson, right down the middle of their offense. That's the main artery by which Iowa's really going to win this game. They're going to rely on their center, rely on their quarterback, and rely on their running back right down the core of the football field. And that's really going to be a key thing to watch over the course of this game. By the way, for those of you who are curious, Tyler Goodson, Iowa starting running back, he's known as Spin Shady. That's a signature move. He likes to get that defender on an island and spin away from him in order to get a big gain. Tight end Sam Laporta is someone to watch. Wide receivers Nico Reganey and Tyrone Tracy Jr. On the defensive side of the ball, their pass rusher that you need to watch out for is Zach Van Valkenburg. He had 3.5 sacks last year in a shortened schedule. He's going to really try to come after Michael Penix. Linebackers Jack Campbell, Seth Benson, and Dane Belton are all people to watch out for. And we talked about their tough, talented members of their secondary earlier. Matt, the way I look at this is Iowa's always a tough defense, and that's going to stay the same way this year. Indiana is a team that can get explosive on you. Ty Fryfogle, DJ Matthews, Peyton Hendershot, Miles Marshall. What are your thoughts on how the deep shot will be available in this contest? Because you know for a fact that Nick Sheridan and Michael Penix Jr. would like to let it rip, if at all possible.
I think they will. I think it would be smart for them to. And this is something you didn't bring up, and I didn't bring up when talking about people returning, but on Iowa's side, they're missing a lot of their top receivers from last year. In fact, they lost their top 3 receivers from last year, that in Amir Smith-Marset, Sam Laporta, and Brandon Smith. No, not sorry.
Laporta's back, but it's the other two
Sam
guys, yeah.
Smith and Brandon Smith. Yeah. So both of them are gone. Which means that Spencer Petrus is going to be throwing a lot more to some new players, whereas at IU, that's not going to be totally the case because Ty Fryfogle is back. So I would definitely like to see Nick Sheridan and Michael Penix open up the game a little bit by throwing out on the wings to somebody like Ty Fryfogle, who I think is going to have a good matchup against these corners. And when I look at this Iowa defense, I know the metrics love them and put them number 1. I think they're a very good defense. Don't get me wrong, but I see a lot of weaknesses in this team, especially last year when they went up against very physical, tall wide receivers. Something that IU has, which is nice. Also, Penix is really good under pressure. That's something that has been shown in some of the metrics. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the FBS, returning and throwing under pressure, completion percentage under pressure, you name it, anything under pressure, he is really good at. So I don't care if they blitz Penix. I mean, I do care because I don't want him to get hit. But if he does, I have the utmost confidence that he's going to make a good play and be able to break this Iowa defense in half.
Yeah, when you talk about those receivers, those big physical receivers that have found gaps in Iowa's coverage, I remember the season opener last year where David Bell, a receiver that's on the same level, if not maybe a tick higher than Ty Fryfogle and Miles Marshall, he had 13 catches for 121 yards and 3 touchdowns against Iowa. So if there's a concentrated focus to get your stars the ball, it definitely looks like there are some chances for success there. I mean, let me tell you, let me just zoom out for a second, Matt, because when I see this matchup, I think there's really 2 ways. There are really 2 ways where Indiana loses this game. Okay. Yeah. And I know, and there are like 100 different ways to skin a cat in this situation, but in here, there are really just two ways where I don't see Indiana coming out with a win. Okay. Yeah. The first, and I'm not talking about injuries. Okay. Injuries are a whole different ball. We're going to set that aside.
Correct. Yeah.
The first one is if Iowa controls the trenches. That's the biggest concern I have in this game. Can Indiana's offensive line fend off Iowa's defensive line? And can Indiana's defensive line make a difference against Iowa's offensive line? That, to me, is a massive matchup in the course of this game. If you can do that, you're going to be really successful. The second way Indiana loses this game is if they let that Penick Stadium crowd get to them, because it's going to be loud and it's going to be boisterous and people are going to be desperately excited and pumped up and euphoric to be back in the building after they were unable to in Iowa City last year to do the wave and to do all their crazy stuff that they do in Iowa City. Those are the two ways. If Indiana can control the trenches or at least fight to a stalemate in the trenches and not make silly mistakes, the false starts, the excessive timeouts, the showing waverability in the front of a big, massive crowd. Everything else, I look in this matchup favors Indiana.
Yeah.
Everything else. Indiana's got the better quarterback.
Yeah.
The much better quarterback. Like, if you believe that football in 2021 is a quarterback's game, that is a black and white M&M mismatch when it comes to Michael Penix Jr. versus Spencer Petrus. The numbers play that out. The advanced metrics play that out. PFF says that Michael Penix Jr. is one of the 5 best quarterbacks returning to college football this year. They rated Spencer Petrus as one of the worst. He's a guy who has very poor accuracy beyond 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. He's somebody that has an extreme happy feet in the pocket. He gets very fidgety. If you could add to some pressure and fluster him just a little bit. Indiana's got the better wide receivers in this game. Indiana has the better tight end room in this game. Yeah. And I like Indiana's defensive personnel in the linebacker level. We've got Micah McFadden. They don't. And at the secondary level, we've got Tywan Mullen and Reese Taylor and Devon Matthews and Jalen Marshall, and they don't. Everywhere else I see Indiana win this game. So if I could drill it down to just that for Hoosier fans, that's all it comes down to. If there's pressure in the face of Michael Penix Jr. and Indiana's averaging 2 yards a carry and can't put Spencer Petrus off his spot in the pocket, then we're going to have problems. So, do you see where I'm coming from as far as this matchup? Because when I looked at Iowa film from last year, those are the things that really stood out. Man, Spencer Petrus stinks as a quarterback.
He's bad. He's actually bad. Like, legitimately, he had 6.4 yards per attempt or per completion last year. 6.4 yards per completion. That is nothing. He had 9 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Okay, they played 8 games. He threw 5 picks.
And he had 2 NFL receivers.
Yes.
And an NFL tight end, Sean Byer, who's now
with Denver. He had an NFL offensive line. Heck, 3 of them are on NFL teams. And he had an NFL offense, and he was in charge of it, and he barely played well. I was listening to a couple Iowa podcasts this week because that's what you do in order to prepare for something like this.
That's right, yeah.
And I was listening to them talk about it, like, he had a slow start. I'm like, sure, okay. Every player has a slow start to the season. That happens sometimes. It's just they get into the groove of things. He wasn't that great at the end of the season either. Like, let's be honest. They were winning games not because of him, but besides him. Like, he was not a factor. And if you can make him have to make plays, like, if you can get pressure on him, if you can stop the run, which is a huge if, but if you can at least negate the run to where instead of, Goodson getting 100 yards,
right.
He's getting like 85 this game. If you have to force Petrus to be the X factor in this offense,
then you got something.
Indiana is going to do well.
Yeah,
for 2 reasons.
They'll win. Yeah,
for 2 reasons. 1, he's not used to that. But 2, he's very, like Nithin said, he's very inaccurate and very prone to making mistakes. and we were the best secondary in the country last year at forcing turnovers. And so, to me, that's the X factor in this game. A lot of people talk about, oh, is Indiana going to be good? What's their offensive line going to be like? Sure, these are great questions to ask. But is Spencer Petrus going to be able to play well? If he plays well and actually shows improvement from last year and is able to take the game into his own and not make mistakes, Iowa has a decent chance. But if he's the same Spencer Petrus from last year, Iowa has zero chance. He's going to throw 3 picks. Iowa didn't play a defense like Indiana's last year all season. Sure, you can maybe say that Wisconsin maybe was close, but even Wisconsin's secondary I thought was subpar at best. Yeah, Tuttle looked decent against them. And Tuttle did not look good against any other opponent, really. So if I'm being honest here, I'm very confident about this IU win. The only thing, like Nithin said previously, I'll bring up his extra point because Nithin makes very good points. That's why he talks a lot. And that is the crowd. IU's not used to playing in front of crowds. It's been a year, and Iowa goes nuts, especially Penick, first game of the season, 3:30 game, ranked teams. They're going to be chomping at the bit to be screaming their heads off.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be tailgating since 8 a.m. because that's all you can do in Iowa City. And so I'm a little bit worried about that. Of course, I will be there in the crowd being extremely silent whenever Iowa fans are yelling. I promise I won't be talking. And so hopefully I will be able to contribute to that. But in all seriousness, this is going to be a really good test for this IU team. And if they can pass this test and shut up a lot of the national analysts that think that Iowa's going to win this game, we start to like get extremely excited, not for next week, Idaho was Schmidaho, but the week after that, because then that sets up a gigantic game, national game at home against Cincinnati.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to everyone who's joining us here on this week 1 preview. Indiana and Iowa going at it Saturday, September 4th, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central. That game's going to kick off on BTN. Thank you for joining us here on the Hoosier Sound Podcast. We're going to be with you this week and every week over the course of the rest of the season, and then transitioning into men's basketball and women's basketball. It's a really, really exciting time to be an Indiana Hoosier fan, and we're your one-stop shop for all the coverage. In addition to Matt being in the crowd, we're going to send 2 additional folks who are credentialed to cover the game at Penick Stadium for you. So make sure you head over to our Twitter account at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. And head over to our Facebook page as well. Give us a like, give us a follow, and you'll be set. You'll be the most educated IU football fan in the workplace, in your house, during your family gatherings, for Labor Day dinners and barbecues and all this sort of thing. Like, you're going to be well informed. So make sure you give us a follow. We bring a fresh, unique, diverse perspective to covering Indiana University sports, and it starts this weekend. It's time for Who Won the Week real quick when it comes to IU sports. And this is the time where we want to look outside of football and men's basketball to bring you something. And hey, how about IU men's soccer? No surprise, they're ready and reloaded for another season after their heartbreaking loss in the national championship game back in May. The Hoosiers have started the year 2-0. An absolutely electrifying win at Notre Dame in the season opener back on Friday night. And the Hoosiers bumped Marshall, who lost over the weekend, to jump up a spot to be the top-ranked men's soccer program in the nation. The Hoosiers are number 1 after wins at Notre Dame and against Butler. They continue this weekend with more action. Make sure you follow them. They're always a reliable program. If you're a heartbroken sports fan and you know Indiana University and you want to follow somebody you know is going to win a handful of games, make sure you give IU men's soccer a look. Their home games, just to tell you something from a student perspective, someone who used to attend school at Indiana University, attending games at Bill Armstrong Stadium is one of the most fun experiences you'll have. Also, doesn't take 4 hours. So, overall, really enjoyable time supporting and taking a look at the men's soccer program. Friendly reminder before we get back to our IU Iowa preview, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. Remember, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review. tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. So, Matt, one of the things I noticed when looking into this game is that the over-under for this contest is just 46 points. Okay, 46. A 25-21 game in 2021 college football. It sounds weird to me. And I look at the offensive skill players and I say, there's a lot of talent here. It's going to be low scoring. How do you see this game playing out? What type of game are you expecting? Are you expecting a shootout or a slugfest here in the Big Ten opener?
Yeah, I actually could see either. I see that line as Vegas being like, I'm so confused about what this game is going to be like. They're like, we weren't expecting Indiana to be ranked. What is this?
Yeah,
the
right.
AP poll didn't even have our logo last year when we got ranked. So that's how little they were prepared. But I think it could go two ways. Either it's going to be 10-3 and both defenses are just going to take over and it's going to be pure 1992 Big Ten football, or it's going to be classic 2020 reincarnate where you have two defenses that aren't performing up to snuff and two offenses that are flying off the hinges, and it's going to be like a 40-40 game. It could be either or. It's going to be close, I think, because I do see this Iowa defense giving some trouble to the offense for IU, if I'm going to be realistic here. And I do see our defense having some question marks when it comes to our front four and defending the run. Again, missing Jerome Johnson in the middle is going to be a huge loss for IU, especially when it comes to run defense. Of course, I would love to see somebody like CO step up and be 75% of what Jerome was last year, because you're not going to ask him to. Jerome's an NFL player. You're not going to ask him to be to replace him entirely, but to come in and at least fill a little bit of that hole. And of course, you have an All-American, Micah McFadden, a preseason All-American, that is, and hopefully All-American by the end of the year in the middle of the linebacking core. So I do like our ability to stop the run, I like the idea of that we would be able to, the prospect that we would be able to. Of course, that has not yet to have been seen. And so if that is not the case, I could definitely see this being a high scoring game, especially if you can take, like I said, the onus off Spencer Petrus.
Yeah.
If you can, they're not scoring more than 3 points.
I mean, I'm not someone who wants to take a quarterback in the Big Ten lightly, but it's just everything you look at with Petrus is concerning if you're an Iowa football fan. You're talking about somebody who's unable to really rip the ball beyond 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. He's accurate in the short game. He's accurate with those dig routes and those shallow crosses to get the ball to his wide receivers with some momentum. But, as far as a guy who's unable to take a deep shot, not very mobile, happy feet in the pocket, flustered under pressure, it's a chance for Indiana's defense to really exert itself. I see this. With that said, though, I like Iowa's run game, and you're talking about being able to control it, Matt. I mean, what kind of numbers are you looking at for the run game? Is it under 100 yards of success, or under 50, or under 150? Let's put a number to it. What would you say is a good day in the office for Indiana's front seven against Iowa's running game?
I think under 125.
Yeah. Okay.
I think because, again, Goodson gets a majority of the carries here, but he's not going to get all of them.
He'll get a majority of them, especially this year with two other backs out of the picture now.
Correct. Yeah. So he's going to get the most of them. I think if you can hold him around 100 yards on the day, and then the other backs to about 25 or 30 yards. So I think the 125, 130 mark, I think, is what you can ask for, because, again, 100 yards rushing, like in this day and age in a football game, is a good number. But when you look at the total number of yards last year gained by Iowa, a lot of it was in the running game. So if they're gaining 125 yards, they're probably only passing for like 70 or 80 yards in that game, because, again, a majority of the yardage comes from running the football and getting out and getting ahead of the defense that way. So Iowa, weirdly enough, is super balanced when it comes to their offense. When I looked at their numbers, again, 1,300 yards rushing, 1,500 yards through the air. I was like, like that's a little weird. Like, how
Yep.
is that working? And then I looked at their attempts and I was like, well, 296 rushing attempts versus 141 total catches. I was like, that's a little weird. But they had 248 attempts throwing, 296 total attempts
Yeah.
running
Isn't
last
that
year.
crazy? You don't see
Yeah.
that often nowadays.
Yeah. Because again, a lot of quarterbacks' completions percentage are much higher than Spencer Petrus, who's sitting at 57%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And, Penix's completion percentage is not much different, but Michael Penix Jr. is somebody who
he
unleashes the
throws the
ball
ball.
down
He
the
gets the
field
ball down the field
and is graded a lot more respectably than Spencer Petrus is. Tyler Goodson is really good. I want to make that very clear. I don't have the same level of cynicism towards Tyler Goodson than I do for Spencer Petrus. Goodson is someone who was very responsible for Iowa's turnaround last season. They lost their first two games. They lost at Purdue to start the season. They lost at home to Northwestern in week 2, and a lot of noise was surrounding that Iowa football program. And it was Goodson who really elevated his game. They gave Goodson more carries, and over the course of the last 6 games, all against Big Ten opponents, he averaged over 100 yards per game in those contests. Yeah, I like your point about 125 being a good number. Of course, something like last year's game at Wisconsin, where Indiana held the Badgers to 140 yards on 35 carries, 4 yards a carry. If you can limit it to, 4.5, 4.2 yards per carry or less, I think that's a good day in the office for IU. The depth chart was released, by the way, by Tom Allen and the Indiana Hoosiers program earlier this week. Some interesting notes. Matt, you did mention that Stephen Carr is someone to keep an eye out for in this game. IU's running back. He is officially the starter. It's been made clear. Carr won whatever running back battle there was in the preseason over Tim Baldwin. You better believe that Tim Baldwin will get some carries, though. Otherwise, on the offense, it's the starting center will be Zach Carpenter, the redshirt sophomore transfer from the University of Michigan. The starting guards will be Mike Caddick, redshirt sophomore, as well as Dylan Powell, a graduate transfer from Stanford, who's now in his second year at Indiana. On the defensive side of the ball, Ryder Anderson is a name that all Hoosier fans will get to know soon. He's a 6'6", 266 transfer from the University of Mississippi, defensive end, edge player. He's going to be very responsible in controlling the run game as well as rushing the passer. So, spoiler alert, to answer a question we're going to ask here in a second, he's one of my keys to the game for Indiana to come out on top. I like seeing that DeMarcus Elliott is listed as a starter on defensive tackle, as well as Big CEO Nofoa Gatotoa.
We haven't pronounced the name in a year.
It's week 1. It's week 1. I'm gonna get that one. I'm circling the Cincinnati game, and he's a good player. We should know who he is.
Yes.
And I'm not just gonna call him Big CEO. I'm gonna respect that family name of his. So I'm gonna circle the Cincinnati game by 2 weeks. I'm gonna nail that one. How about Alfred Bryant, a name that has been in the Indiana program for some time? He gets to start at the bull position over Jaron Handy, as well as beating out Michael Ziemba. Handy is an Auburn transfer. And then, the other name that really stood out to me was the safety position, where Raheem Lane, a redshirt senior who missed the pandemic shortened season in 2020 and missed a lot of those really historic moments that Indiana football is supposed to put together. Lane is going to start at safety for Indiana over Jawan Burgess. Lane is, by the way, the first Hoosier football player ever to wear number 0. So that's how you're going to be able to denote him on the field there. So, Matt, overall, really interesting depth chart breakdown. We saw that we talked about some of the keys that we're looking at as far as IU winning this game is concerned. Let's talk about individuals, okay? Individuals on this Indiana Hoosier football roster coming off that depth chart that we just looked at. Who's one offensive player that's got to deliver for IU to win? And who's one defensive player you want to see make an impact on Saturday?
Yeah, so for offense, I know it's a lot to put onto one player in particular, especially a new transfer. In fact, both my impact players are going to be transfers that need to actually step up in this game. That's Zach Carpenter on the offensive line at center. Again, the center position on the offensive line is the one mostly in charge of the offensive line. You are the heart and soul. literally in the middle of that offensive line. So you are going to have to control everything. He also is going to be a huge part of false starts and knowing the snap count and being able to be prepared when there's a lot of noise. Penick can get very noisy. He's going to have to be prepared to, whether it's an audible count or just a non-audible count and a silent count, he's got to know everything. He's got to be prepared. And we can't be taking 5, 10, 15-yard penalties because of silly mistakes. It's just going to cost us the game. It's going to put our offense in bad positions. And so for me, on offense, Zach Carpenter is the one that's going to have most responsibility this game for coming in as a newbie. So good luck to him. I think he's going to do fine. He's obviously very promising coming from Michigan. Second guy I would like to point out too is that I'm forgetting his name because he's new, but from Ole Miss, the transfer. You're muted.
Oh, Ryder Anderson.
He's stepping in front of, I believe, James Head, correct? He stepped in front of him. And James Head is somebody who we had a ton of very complimentary thoughts and feelings and comments about going into this year, talking about how he's going to be very impactful. Again, he looked very good last year in the times he did play for IU, and we were going to be excited for him to step into that role. He comes in, and Ryder Anderson dethrones him basically from that position and takes over as number one. So again, I want to see why he did. Why was that the coaching staff's decision? Is it because he has more experience than James Head? I don't think so. I mean, maybe, but I don't think that's the case, because if he's coming in as a true SEC style defensive lineman, defensive edge rusher off the edge, if he can do that and show promise, this defense goes from a 9.5 to a 10. Somebody we've talked about previously, Handy, Jalen Handy, or Jaron Handy, the other transfer from Auburn. If we can get these guys and these athletes, these SEC style rushers, get off the edge with the talent that we have in CO, Norfolk got Gatoa in the middle, and Juwan Burgess. Or not Juwan Burgess.
Raheem Lane, Devon Matthews.
Everybody on the defense. Yeah. If you can get pressure off the edge in college football in general, you're looking at a fantastic defense. Again, when you look at all the top defenses in college football, you look at the Clemsons, the Alabamas of the world, they sell their soul basically to have a good defensive line because it's a game changer, because it takes so much pressure off your secondary, and we already have a really good secondary. So if we have some game changers there that we've brought in through transfer on the defensive line, that could really up our potential for the season.
Trench play matters so much in the Big Ten. It matters so much in the Big Ten. You talk about SEC style players. I mean, these are literally SEC players.
Yes,
Ryder Anderson and Jaron Handy, who have experience. Ryder Anderson put together 7 sacks up in the Ole Miss program before his transfer to Indiana. To me, when I look at the offense, the guy that I'm going to pay a lot of attention to is Miles Marshall. And here's the thing. We know what Michael Penix is going to bring to the table. Yeah. We know what Ty Fryfogle's expectations are this year. Peyton Hendershot is somebody that is one of the best returning tight ends in college football. Stephen Carr and Tim Baldwin are a really strong 1-2 punch out of the backfield. But Miles Marshall is the guy that's going to take the pressure off of all of them. And if Miles Marshall can attract attention and make 1 or 2 contested catches, because Iowa secondary is pretty good, they're going to be in your face. They're going to be hitting you over the middle. They're going to be taking risks, trying to disrupt the game, trying to score on defense, because they know that their offense is limited in some capacity. I told you ESPN S&P Plus had them as a 56th rated offense in the country out of 120 something teams. Miles Marshall is someone who has had good games against good teams before. He had a good game against Michigan last year, for example. And they had a contentious defense. I remember him making big catches against Ohio State secondary last year. Miles Marshall is someone who's been a big game player. And I'm looking forward to seeing him loosen up the coverages for all the other stars on Indiana's offense. I'm not expecting Marshall to go out and get 10 catches for 150 yards and do what David Bell did to the secondary last year. Not at all. But if you're talking about somebody 4 catches, 60 yards, maybe get in the end zone. I'm also going to look at how his run blocking has improved out on the boundary. Yeah. Can he make sure that Stephen Carr and Tim Baldwin can get an extra couple of yards if they push or run out to the edge? Miles Marshall is the offensive player I'm going to watch. And then on the defense, Matt Co. Yes, absolutely. I need to see Co making an impact on the defensive line. Knock out Tyler Goodson. Make sure you control him to 1 or 2 yards per carry, especially on the interior runs. But of course, the secondary is so important, especially when you go up against a couple of guys like Tyrone Tracy and Nico Reganey. Tywan Mullen is the guy I can't ignore. I can't believe we've made it 48 minutes without mentioning him to this point. Tywan Mullen, superstar corner in that starting position. He's a junior now. Can't wait to see him pick off Spencer Petrus and take one to the house. That would silence that Kinnick Stadium crowd without a question. And to dig in a little bit further, Indiana's got to have a good first quarter. And that's why I hope the Fordham, Nebraska game on Big Ten Network before ours, I hope that game wraps up in a clean 3 hours so we can get a proper kickoff, 2:30 p.m. Central, 3:30 Eastern on Big Ten Network. I don't want to miss any of the first few minutes because those are going to be some of the biggest minutes in the game. You know, who wins the toss, who elects to defer or receive the football from the beginning. The first quarter is going to be really important for Indiana. Bless you. My goodness.
Thank you. Sorry. I tried to hit the mute button. It didn't work.
Oh man. Ironically, I muted myself earlier. I didn't mean to. So, you know, it all comes around full circle. So that's how we see this game going. We're going to give you our prediction here in just a second. But first, it's time for a social media shout out. And I'm going to tip my cap to Indiana's all-star forward, Trace Jackson Davis, who is named preseason first team All-American by Athlon. Jackson Davis is the leading returning scorer in the Big Ten, started all 27 games last season and is already he's already catching the attention of people all around college basketball. Circle your calendars, folks. Indiana starts their season November 9th at home against Eastern Michigan. Also, a special announcement for those of you who have hung with us here for about 45 minutes on this podcast. We're looking to add to our team at Indiana HQ as well as at the Hoosier Sound. If you or someone you know is a big sports fan and knows a lot, is well-informed and well-educated about basketball and football and is in the Bloomington area and wants life-changing experiences to cover men's basketball and football and all the other sports at Indiana University, hit us up on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. We'd love to add you to our team. It's been unbelievable being part of this experience over the course of the last 3 years or so. I've gone into Happy Valley. I've seen Camp Randall Stadium, Breslin, Mackey Arena, all the big-time venues in the Big Ten. Awesome experience. Can't wait to, this year, for example, go to the Big House in Ann Arbor, something that we haven't had the chance to do since the inception of this website. So really excited. Looking forward to adding someone to our team here. Again, make sure you message us on Twitter at Indiana HQ or at the Hoosier Sound, and we will continue our conversation over there. All right, Matt, let's get to our prediction for this game. Indiana's a 4-point underdog, over under 46, season opener, week 1, top 20 matchup. Indiana against Iowa. What's your prediction? Who wins? What's the score?
IU 31-24.
There you go.
So I said, take the over.
The chase.
I think there's going to be more points scored than Vegas thinks. I think IU wins by a touchdown, and they close. What happens is in proper IU fashion, we get off to a fast start. I think they have a good start, and Iowa slowly starts to come back. They get some belief, and with about 45 seconds left on the clock, Spencer Petrus has the onus on him to make the play. And one of our stars in the secondary is going to finish off the game by picking him off and returning the ball to about the midfield line. But Michael Penix will take some knees and the victory formation.
Symbolically.
Yeah, takes a knee.
Takes a knee.
Yeah. and we win the game and we get out of there with a win.
Yeah, I like your optimism, Matt. I like your optimism. Look, I had thought of how this game was going to go really once it was announced and over the course of the next weeks and months, and really the last 10 to 14 days really changed my mind. I was a little upset that Indiana had to face Iowa in week 1. I said, this sucks. I was getting a home game against Indiana, a team that is coming off a great season, but it's a top 20 matchup on the road week 1. Disgusting. But ever since then, I've really dug into the matchup. I've looked at how Iowa played last season, and I've been on Zoom calls with Tom Allen, Nick Sheridan, Charlton Warren, and Michael Penix Jr., and the rest of this team. And they're all saying the right things. Indiana's mindset right now is so on point. They're like an NFL football team going into what the season's like. There's no noise around the program in the locker room, in the battlefield. Their meetings seem to have a purpose. Their practices seem to have intent behind them and focus in it. And that's why when it's all said and done, not only do I think Indiana will win, I think Indiana wins pretty comfortably in this contest. I've got IU coming out on top 27-17 against the Iowa Hawkeyes. And, again, when you think about the kind of game that's going to be played, keeping yourself at arm's length against the Hawkeyes, a 10-point reach, 10-point gap between the teams, I think is something that Hoosier fans will absolutely take 100%. This is, to me, not going to be a game that comes down to the final play. I don't think it's going to be like that. I told you, though, the two things Indiana's got to be worried about, though, is that trench matchup on both sides of the ball, and then making sure they're disciplined as far as how they go up against the Penick Stadium crowd, which will be about 70,000 people on Saturday in Iowa City. I hit up the Twitter poll, as I usually do, on the Hoosier Sound Twitter account, and I asked IU fans, who do you think is going to win? And how many total points do you think are scored in this ball game? Now, no surprise, vast majority of people, already over 100 votes in the first 20 minutes that this podcast is, the poll had been uploaded. No surprise that 93% of people think Indiana are going to win. I mean, come on. Hoosier fans are pumped up. Hoosier fans are excited. But interesting to see that, much like what you're saying, Matt, the majority of people, 57% of them, think the game will go over 46.5 points. I said 27-17, so I think it's going to be slightly under. That, of course, is an option picked by 43% of our voters so far. Make sure you head over to our Twitter account at the Hoosier Sound. Cast your vote. It'll be up until kickoff on Saturday afternoon. As we look at the rest of the Big Ten slate, Matt, I'm excited for this segment. Every week on this show, we look at other Big Ten games that are taking place. Sports betting is legal in Indiana. DraftKings Sportsbook, FanDuel Sportsbook. I know a lot of you listening might, just for a little fun and games, put a pretty penny on some of the Big Ten action going around on college football, especially in the Big Ten. A lot of heavyweight matchups in the first week. On this podcast, as we will do throughout the rest of the year to wrap it up, we'll give you one pick against the spread and then one upset special. So, Matt, I'm going to toss it over to you first. You can either give both of yours now or just do the spread pick first. As you look at the Big Ten slate, especially at the games Friday and Saturday, what's your first pick that stands out to you?
Well, and the first pick is Wisconsin -5.5. Wisconsin Penn State is probably the biggest game of the slate out of all the Big Ten games. Yeah, Iowa, Indiana is pretty good within itself, but that is a reason why they are the 12 o'clock game on.
I think they're just biased. I think Indiana, Iowa is going to. I think Penn State, Wisconsin's going to put people to sleep.
Maybe. I mean, I think at the end of the year, they might look at this Iowa Indiana game and go, wow, we had two of the best teams in their respective divisions playing, where I could very much see Wisconsin and Penn State having very disappointing seasons again. I mean, I don't like James Franklin as a head coach at all. And so I would take the Wisconsin, the over-under is 49.5. Mm-hmm. I would take the under on that. I think both teams' offenses are going to struggle. I think both teams pride themselves on playing very good defense there. And even though 49.5, you look at it and go, well, that might be pretty low scoring. I think it is going to be low scoring. It's the first game of the season. Both teams are going to be ready to play. I think defenses are going to come out and shut down those offenses. So I would take the under on that game. Okay. And then for the upset special,
let's go for it. Yeah,
I like chaos. Chaos is fun.
Say it.
And so I like Western Michigan to beat Michigan.
Okay. I didn't think you were going to say that one. Okay. All right.
I'd put like $3 on it because it'll pay a lot. But I could definitely see Michigan again. Indiana has seen this happen before, but in a completely different sport. When you play a team that thinks they deserve to play at the same level of you within your state. Again, Western Michigan having that fantastic season a couple of years ago, and getting a chance for redemption against the team from within their state, they're going to play up a level. And it's going to be the first game of the season for Michigan with a lot of new pieces at Michigan to move around on that team. I could very much see Michigan and Jim Harbaugh starting off the season in proper Jim Harbaugh fashion by losing to Western Michigan.
That would be chaos. That would be absolute.
I'm rooting for that. That's my pick.
Absolute bedlam. I've got Purdue covering 7 against Oregon State. I think Purdue's going to come back with a fresh mindset going into the season. It's going to be the season opener. I don't think they'll take Oregon State lightly. I love David Bell as a wide receiver, so I think Purdue's going to end up beating Oregon State by more than 7 on Saturday night. And Matt, Fordham's going to beat Nebraska. I'm done with Nebraska. Nebraska stinks. So I don't even see odds for that game right now. I don't even know if they exist somewhere. But whatever, if they pop up somewhere on DraftKings or FanDuel or wherever, just take Fordham straight up to win. It's going to happen. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. On the other, if there are no odds that come up for that game, I do like Texas San Antonio going into Champaign and knocking off the Illini.
Really?
I know Illinois is going to feel pretty good about themselves after last week, but UTSA is an interesting team. When you see that the point spread is just 5 points, it's a little sneaky as well. It's going to be UTSA season opener. Illinois might have a little bit of an emotional lull. So those are the two teams that started the Big Ten season last week. Clearly you can tell what my thoughts about what both of those squads are. So that's what Matt and I are looking at as far as the Big Ten slate for the weekend. Of course, Indiana, Iowa is going to be the game that we pay the most attention to over the entirety of this Friday and Saturday. So Matt, as we wind down, what are your closing thoughts? Indiana, Iowa, week 1, the Hoosiers about to start their 2021 football journey. What's crazy is about 5 days from now, we might have a podcast episode where we're either really excited or really upset.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what it's either going to be pure depression or pure euphoria. I'm going to be talking about college football playoff predictions, or I'm going to be talking about why 2022 should be fired.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's man.
Yeah. Oh God. Oh no.
That would be funny. Anyway, so that's what's crazy. Yeah, it's either going to be college football playoff predictions or 2022. What should we look forward to as far as this Indiana football program is concerned? But like as I talked about a minute ago, getting on those Zoom calls with the coaches and the players on this team, I get the vibe that they're ready to continue to disrupt the Big Ten. You think about the progressions Indiana has made, right? It was okay. They first of all started consistently beating Rutgers and Maryland down at the bottom of the conference. And then, and this has all really happened over the last 3 years. Remember, they also beat Northwestern when Northwestern was struggling. They beat Purdue, especially when Purdue was having a rough season in 2019. And then the Hoosiers, right, kept transitioning. And last year it was beating Penn State and Michigan and Wisconsin when those teams were having difficult seasons. Now, right, it's like it's the next level boss in this Indiana football video game, right? It's going to be 70,000 people, packed house, Iowa football. And I get the vibe that Indiana's sick of Iowa. Right? I have a feeling Indiana's going to go into Penick Stadium and say, your time is done. Your time as the consistent, stable force in the Big Ten that's not as good as Ohio State, but not as bad as the bottom of the conference where you're good for about 8 wins a year, every year. your time is done. We want to be that next. We're coming after you. We're recruiting like that. We're performing like that. We're coming after you. And symbolically, I'm just getting the vibe that Indiana's sick of Iowa. Indiana's sick of Penn State. Indiana's sick of, not necessarily Ohio State, because Ohio State is a really elite program. But these teams in that 3 to 7 range in the Big Ten, where Indiana wants to consistently get to, I get the vibe that they're going to walk into Iowa City with a chip on their shoulder and not just play to beat the Hawkeyes on the scoreboard on Saturday, but beat them for what it means in the long run as far as Big Ten superiority is concerned. So even though Iowa's a Big Ten West team, Indiana is a Big Ten East team, traditional rivals, teams that have been longtime members of the conference, and I think Indiana's ready. Even though they've lost 7 of the last 8 to the Hawkeyes, and they're 28-45 against Iowa all time, I think Indiana's ready to take it away from Iowa and become that type of force in the Big Ten for the years to come. But that about wraps it up for our 215th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You are all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. That, as far as I'm concerned, is it. As always, thank you